The pristine white walls of Princess Zilia's chambers gleamed like polished bone beneath the soft, pulsing light of Cygnus X7's twin moons. She stood before the wall-length mirror, watching as attendants fastened the ceremonial regalia around her slender form. Her skin, with its characteristic alabaster sheen common to all Cygnians, appeared almost translucent in the dim light, the dormant bioluminescent patterns beneath her epidermis barely visible in their inactive state. The delegates from the Proxima Centauri Coalition will expect adherence to Protocol 7 during the first 3 exchanges, noted her chief advisor, Thalia, scrolling through a holographic manifest floating above her wrist. Please recall the 17 nonverbal cues indicating receptiveness to diplomatic overtures, Your Highness. Zilia maintained her perfect posture, letting her eyelids close briefly, the only outward sign of her mounting stress. I have reviewed the protocols 23 times, Thalia. The proximity gestures, the orbital salutations, and the counter-rotation courtesies. I will not embarrass the stellar court. When the attendants finally departed, Zilia allowed herself a small, rare moment of impropriety, a sigh. The sound barely disturbed the sterile air of her chambers, but it carried the weight of 1,000 diplomatic briefings, 1,000,000 carefully modulated interactions, and the ever-present, crushing expectation of perfection. A soft chime announced an incoming communication, and a small holographic projection of her younger sister Lyra materialized beside her dressing table. You look like you're being fitted for your burial shroud, rather than preparing for a diplomatic function, Lyra observed with characteristic bluntness that would scandalize any elder of the court. Propriety is the backbone of our society, Lyra, Zilia replied automatically, the words a recitation she'd been taught since infancy. Propriety is slowly calcifying your spirit, Lyra countered. Her own appearance was a subtle rebellion. Her traditional court attire modified with prohibited design elements. Her posture deliberately casual. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel anything beyond duty? I feel pride in serving our people, Zilia replied, though even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. Lyra's projection flickered as she leaned forward. Pride isn't enough to sustain a life, sister. What about joy? Excitement? Even your anger is so tightly controlled, it barely registers on the emotional spectrum. Zilia turned away, unwilling to acknowledge the truth in her sister's words. The upcoming negotiations require my complete focus. They always do, Lyra interrupted. There's always another negotiation, another ceremony, another reason to suppress anything resembling genuine emotion. She paused, her expression softening. I worry about you, Zilia. Truly, after Lyra's projection faded, Zilia remained motionless, staring at the space her sister had occupied. Somewhere deep beneath layers of protocol and training, a tiny, almost imperceptible part of her acknowledged that Lyra might be right. But such thoughts were dangerous, particularly for one in her position, and especially now, with the rumors of an early conjunction cycle. Such astronomical phenomena were typically predictable to the minute, occurring once every 7 years, but recent solar flare activity had disrupted the usual patterns. The conjunction was more than an astronomical event. It was a biological imperative for their species, a time when carefully maintained emotional and physical restraints weakened, when the bioluminescent patterns beneath their skin flared to life, and when biological urges that remained dormant most of their lives emerged with unstoppable force. For most Cygnians, these times were carefully managed through ritual and separation. For the royal line, with their more potent biology, the control had to be absolute. Meanwhile, across the pristine halls of the royal complex, Lyra was engaged in a far less sanctioned activity. Her private quarters, while still luxurious by any standard, featured subtle rebellions against Cygnian aesthetic norms. Objects placed asymmetrically, fabrics with varied textures rather than the prescribed uniform smoothness, and most shocking of all, personal items displayed openly rather than stored behind seamless panels. She hunched over a specialized communication device, carefully disguised as an approved meditation enhancer. The The screen displayed a marketplace unlike anything permitted on Cygnus X7, a chaotic digital bazaar where traders from 100 systems advertised their wares with none of the restraint valued by a Cygnian society. Filter for comfort aids, non-sentient, Lyra murmured to the device, glancing nervously toward her door. The screen shifted, displaying various items designed for physical and emotional comfort. Items that would be considered unnecessary at best and decadent at worst by Cygnian standards. Her attention was caught by an item listed as a pleasure companion unit from the Andromeda Trade Collective. Unlike the cold, functional comfort aids occasionally prescribed by Cygnian physicians, this creation was designed to provide genuine emotional and physical solace. Its description promised soft fur, a gentle purring vibration, and adaptive warmth, all wrapped in a small, discreet package. Perfect, Lyra whispered, quickly arranging payment through an untraceable credit line she'd carefully established over years. The confirmation showed the item would be delivered directly to Zilia's chambers through a temporary matter transport corridor, bypassing the usual security protocols that would certainly flag such an unauthorized item. Delivery estimated 3 rotations. The screen confirmed before Lyra hastily closed the connection and returned the device to its hiding place. She felt a moment's guilt for the deception, but it was quickly overshadowed by satisfaction. Zilia needed someone, to help her release the crushing tension before it crystallized her from within. If their society wouldn't permit something as basic as emotional comfort, then Lyra would have to provide it through less orthodox channels. What Lyra couldn't have known was that, at that exact moment, a small cargo freighter piloted by Kalen Vance was facing a catastrophic systems failure in the midst of an ion storm near Cygnus X7's outer atmosphere. Kalen swore colorfully as warning lights flooded his cockpit, the ship bucking beneath him like a living thing in pain. "Computer, reroute power from life support to stabilizers," he shouted over the screaming alarms. Life support reduced to minimum levels. Stabilizers at 43% capacity. Hull integrity compromised in sections 7 through 12. The computer's calm voice reported, incongruously pleasant against the backdrop of impending disaster. Kalen's hands flew across the controls, his experienced movements belying the fear coursing through him. He was no stranger to trouble. You didn't survive as an independent cargo hauler in this sector without learning to handle the unexpected, but this was beyond the usual run of bad luck. Emergency protocols initiated, the computer announced. Preparing escape pod for launch. Belay that, Kalen shouted. The pod's navigation system is fried. If it launches now. But it was too late. The ship gave a violent shudder as the escape pod ejected automatically, its trajectory immediately compromised by the ion storm. Kalen watched in horror as the pod was caught in a swirling eddy of charged particles, its communication beacon emitting wildly fluctuating signals before disappearing from his sensors entirely. Emergency beacon activated. Distress signal broadcasting on all frequencies, the computer reported. Kalen grimaced, fighting the controls as the ship continued its descent toward the upper atmosphere of Cygnus X7. The planet was known for its strict isolationist policies and rigid social structures. Being stranded there would be marginally better than death in the vacuum of space, but only marginally. What he couldn't know was that the pod's distress signal, distorted by the ion storm, had become entangled with another signal. The purchasing confirmation for Lyra's illicit comfort aid. As complex algorithms attempted to make sense of the corrupted data, 2 entirely separate events became fatefully intertwined, setting in motion a sequence that neither technology nor protocol could have anticipated. In the sterile confines of her private chambers, Princess Zilia was completing the 3rd hour of her pre-diplomatic meditation when a sharp, unauthorized sound shattered her concentration. She opened her eyes, startled by the breach of her carefully regulated environment, to witness something entirely unprecedented, a shower of golden particles materializing in the center of her room, swirling with increasing speed until they coalesced into a solid form. But instead of the small, furry comfort aid that Lyra had ordered, there appeared a damaged escape pod, and within it, a very unconscious, very human man. The pod's door had been partially crushed in what appeared to be a violent ejection, and smoke seeped from several damaged panels. Through the cracked viewport, Zelia could see the occupant, a being unlike any she had encountered before. His skin was tan rather than alabaster, his clothing utilitarian and stained with what appeared to be mechanical fluids, and most shockingly, his face bore several days' growth of facial hair, a physical feature completely absent in Signia males. Zelia remained frozen, her years of training momentarily useless in the face of such an unprecedented breach. Proper protocol required immediate notification of security forces, isolation of the contaminant, in this case, the unconscious alien, and a full decontamination of her quarters. But something held. Her back. Curiosity, perhaps, or a strange intuition that this situation required discretion rather than procedure. Before she could decide on a course of action, the man groaned, his eyes fluttering open to reveal irises of a startling blue intensity. He blinked several times, clearly struggling to orient himself, then focused on Zelia with obvious confusion. Either I'm dead and the afterlife has better-looking angels than advertised, or I've crashed somewhere I probably shouldn't be, he said, his voice rough from smoke inhalation. Zelia took an involuntary step back, scandalized by the direct address, without proper introductory protocols. You will cease verbal communication until authorized, she commanded, falling back on the formal speech patterns ingrained through years of diplomatic training. Identify your designation and purpose immediately. The man winced as he tried to sit up, one hand going to a nasty-looking gash on his forehead. Name's Kalen Vance, independent cargo hauler out of the Proxima system. As for my purpose, right now it's figuring out how to stop this pounding in my head and why my escape pod seems to have materialized in what looks like the inside of a very expensive, very sterile laboratory. He looked around, taking in the pristine white surfaces and minimalist design of her quarters, or possibly a high-end mental institution. This is a royal residence chamber on Cygnus X7, Zelia informed him stiffly, maintaining her distance. Your presence is unauthorized and constitutes a breach of at least 17 interstellar protocols and 42 planetary statutes. Kalen's eyebrows rose. Cygnus X7? Well, that's unfortunate. He attempted to stand, only to fall back with a grunt of pain. Look, I didn't exactly plan this. My ship hit an ion storm. Systems failed, and the escape pod ejected automatically. Seems like some kind of transporter malfunction brought me here, instead of letting me crash the old-fashioned way. Zelia's logical mind began processing the implications. This man, this alien, had somehow been transported directly into her private chambers, bypassing every security measure the palace employed. If reported, the incident would trigger a diplomatic crisis, security lockdowns, and intensive investigations that would certainly uncover some form of irregularity, possibly even revealing Lyra's illicit communications. You require medical attention, she observed clinically, noting the blood trickling from his forehead wound. Kalen touched the injury again, looking at the blood on his fingers with mild surprise. It's not as bad as it looks. Head wounds always bleed dramatically. He attempted a smile that Zelia found oddly disarming. I don't suppose you have a first aid kit hiding somewhere in this sterile paradise? Remain where you are, Zelia commanded, moving to a wall panel that opened at her touch to reveal a medical cabinet. She selected several items and approached the damaged pod cautiously. I will provide basic medical assistance, after which we will determine the appropriate course of action regarding your unauthorized presence, she stated, maintaining the formal tone that helped her control the unprecedented situation. Kalen watched her approach with open curiosity. Has anyone ever told you that you speak like a navigation computer? All precise and proper. Despite his injuries, there was something undeniably vibrant about him, an energy that seemed to occupy more space than his physical form. Precision in communication prevents misunderstanding, Zelia replied automatically as she applied an antiseptic solution to his wound, careful to minimize physical contact. Even this limited touch, her gloved hand against his alien skin, felt somehow transgressive. Where I come from, a little misunderstanding keeps life interesting, Kalen responded, watching her with those unervingly direct blue eyes. You have a name, or should I just call you your royal formality? Something about his irreverent manner caused an unusual sensation in Zilia's chest, a tightness that wasn't entirely unpleasant. I am Princess Zilia of the Sovereign Stellar Court of Cygnus X7, first daughter of the celestial lineage, primary diplomatic envoy to the outer systems, she recited, the formal introduction flowing automatically. That's quite a mouthful, Kalen observed with another smile that created peculiar lines around his eyes. Mind if I call you Zilia? The informal address should have offended her deeply. Yet Zilia found herself more disconcerted by her lack of offense than by the breach of protocol. Your familiarity is inappropriate, she told him, stepping back after completing the basic first aid. Kalen gingerly touched the sealed wound. Thanks for the patch job. I've had worse from ship mechanics who were supposedly helping me. He glanced around the room again. So, are you going to call security, or do I get a chance to explain how I might fix this situation? Zilia faced a decision unlike any in her carefully structured life. Protocol demanded immediate reporting of the breach. Yet instinct, a faculty she rarely acknowledged, urged caution. Explanations would be prudent before any official notification is made, she finally said. As Kalen began describing the technical malfunction that had brought him to her chambers, Zilia found herself noting unusual details. The animated movements of his hands as he spoke, the changing cadence of his voice, the way his facial expressions shifted with each new thought. Cygnian communication was deliberately controlled, with minimal physical movement and carefully modulated vocal tones. This man communicated with his entire being in a way that was simultaneously alarming and fascinating. Which means if I can access the pod's communication array, I might be able to send a discreet signal to any passing ships, he was saying when Zilia realized she had been observing him rather than fully processing his words. With some luck, I could be out of your royal hair within a few cycles without anyone being the wiser. That would be acceptable, Zilia responded, unsure why she was even considering such an irregular solution. However, you must remain undetected while repairs are attempted. Kalen grinned, the expression transforming his features in a way that caused an unexpected flutter in Zilia's midsection. I'm great at being undetected when it matters. Comes with the territory when you're an independent hauler. Some cargo is better moved quietly, if you know what I mean. You engage in illegal transportation? Zilia asked, alarm returning. He shrugged, another excessively physical gesture. I prefer legally flexible transportation. Sometimes regulations haven't caught up with what people need. His expression turned more serious. I don't move weapons or anything that hurts people, if that's what you're worried about. Just goods that some systems overtax or overregulate. Before Zilia could respond, a familiar chime announced an incoming communication. Panic flashed across her features, an emotional display she would typically never allow. That's my sister, she whispered urgently. You must not be seen or heard. Kalen nodded, quickly retreating into the damaged escape pod and pulling the cracked door closed as Zilia composed herself and accepted the communication. Lyra's holographic form appeared, her expression a mixture of mischief and concern. I just wanted to check if you'd received any unexpected deliveries, she said without preamble. Zilia's eyes darted involuntarily toward the escape pod before she caught herself. What have you done, Lyra? She asked, keeping her voice low. Nothing dangerous, Lyra protested quickly. Just a little something to help you relax. With the diplomatic summit and rumors of an early conjunction, I thought you could use something to ease the tension. She leaned forward conspiratorially. It's a comfort aid from the Andromeda Collective. Completely safe, just not exactly. Approved for import. Zilia closed her eyes briefly, the pieces falling into place. You ordered a prohibited item using an unauthorized communication channel and had it delivered directly to my chambers? When you say it like that, it sounds terrible, Lyra complained. It's just a soft, furry little thing designed for comfort. Half the outer systems use them without any issues. I did not receive your gift, Zelia stated carefully. Perhaps there was a delivery malfunction. Lyra frowned. That's odd. The confirmation showed successful transport. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. You're being strange, even for you. What's going on? Nothing requiring your concern, Zelia replied stiffly. I must prepare for tomorrow's diplomatic functions. We will discuss your inappropriate actions later. After terminating the communication, Zelia turned to find Kalen emerging from the pod, an amused expression on his face. Your sister ordered you a comfort aid? He asked, clearly fighting a smile. Like a stuffed animal or something? Zelia felt an unusual warmth rising to her cheeks. The specifics are irrelevant. What matters is that her unauthorized purchase has apparently resulted in your presence instead. Kalen's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying I've been accidentally delivered to you instead of some kind of cuddle toy? A laugh escaped him, a rich, unrestrained sound that seemed to physically affect the air in the room. That's either the worst shipping error in history or the universe has a very strange sense of humor. I fail to see the humor in this situation, Zelia stated, though something about his laughter caused that strange flutter to return. That, Kalen said, pointing at her with an inappropriate familiarity, might be part of your problem. Sometimes the absurd deserves a good laugh, even for princesses. His expression softened slightly. So your sister thinks you need something to help you relax? Royal life, that's stressful. My responsibilities are significant, Zelia replied automatically, then found herself adding, and yes, they can be taxing. Kayla nodded as if she'd confirmed something important. Everyone needs something to hold on to sometimes, he said with surprising gentleness. Even cargo haulers and princesses. The simple statement, delivered without protocol or pretense, resonated with Zelia in a way that felt dangerous. She turned away, moving toward the environmental controls. You will require sustenance and rest while repairs are attempted. I will adjust the atmospheric composition to better suit your physiology. If Kalen noticed her abrupt change of subject, he didn't comment on it. Instead, he began examining the damaged systems of his escape pod, providing Zelia with a welcome distraction from the unfamiliar emotions his presence stirred within her. What neither of them knew was that the ion storm that had disrupted Kalen's ship had also accelerated certain astronomical phenomena, including the approach of the conjunction cycle that would soon test Zelia's carefully maintained control in ways she could never have anticipated. The following day brought new complications. Zelia was required to attend preliminary diplomatic meetings, leaving Kalen concealed in her private chambers with strict instructions to remain hidden and quiet. Upon her return, she found him not resting or working on repairs as expected, but examining her personal belongings with undisguised curiosity. What are you doing? She demanded, horrified at the breach of her privacy. Kalen turned, holding a small crystalline object that emitted a soft, pulsing light. Sorry, I got bored. What is this thing? It started glowing when I picked it up. Zelia snatched the object from his hand, her fingers inadvertently brushing against his in the process. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system, causing the dormant bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin to flicker briefly to life. A physiological response that should have been impossible outside the conjunction period. That is a personal meditation focus, she said sharply, trying to ignore what had just happened. It responds to bioelectric fields. You should not touch things that don't belong to you. Kalen raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but his eyes had widened at the brief illumination of her skin. Did you just light up? Because that was amazing. It was nothing, Zelia insisted, placing the crystal back in its proper location. A minor physiological response. Meaningless. But it wasn't meaningless, and some part of her knew it. The bioluminescent patterns were directly linked to the Cygnian emotional and reproductive systems, systems that remained dormant outside the conjunction cycle. For them to activate, even briefly, from mere physical contact was unprecedented and concerning. If you say so, Kalen replied, clearly unconvinced. But from where I'm standing, you lit up like the Proxima Aurora, and it was kind of beautiful. Zelia felt that strange warmth returning to her cheeks. Your escape pod. Have you made progress with repairs? Kalen accepted the change of subject with a slight smile. Some. The communication array is more damaged than I initially thought. I might need some specialized tools and components. That would require leaving these chambers, Zelia stated, alarm returning. The risk of discovery is pretty high, I know, Kalen finished for her. But unless you want a permanent human fixture in your royal bedroom, I need those parts. The phrasing caused another flare of warmth in Zelia's face, accompanied by a strange tightening sensation in her abdomen. That would be unacceptable, she managed. Glad we agree, Kalen said, either missing or politely ignoring her discomfort. Any chance your sister might help? She seems like the type who knows how to bend a few rules. Before Zelia could respond, a palace-wide announcement echoed through her chambers. Attention all court members and diplomatic personnel. Astronomical observations confirm accelerated progression of the conjunction cycle. Estimated commencement in 3 rotations rather than the previously calculated 7. All containment protocols are now in effect. Repeat, conjunction containment protocols are now in effect. Zelia froze, genuine alarm breaking through her composed exterior. What's a conjunction cycle? Kalen asked, watching her reaction with concern. And why does it look like you just received a death sentence? It is a biological imperative, Zelia explained stiffly, moving to adjust the controls on her door, engaging additional privacy locks. A time when certain physiological changes occur in my species. Like a mating season, Kalen asked with characteristic directness. Zelia winced at the crude terminology, but nodded. In primitive terms, yes. Modern Cygnian society has developed elaborate protocols to manage these periods, particularly for those of the royal lineage whose biological responses are more intense. And that's bad because during conjunction, our emotional and physical restraints are significantly compromised, Zelia explained reluctantly. The bioluminescent patterns you observe become pronounced and responsive. Physiological needs that are typically suppressed emerge with considerable force. Understanding dawned on Kalen's face. And having a strange man in your bedroom during alien mating season might be a bit problematic. That, Zelia replied with uncharacteristic dryness, would be an understatement. The following day brought the first subtle signs of the approaching conjunction. Zelia woke to find the bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin more visible than usual, pulsing gently even in their dormant state. Her senses seemed heightened. The fabric of her garments felt almost abrasive against her increasingly sensitive skin, and ordinary sounds and scents registered with unusual intensity. Worse, she found herself acutely aware of Kalen's presence in a way that went beyond the simple knowledge that he was there. Even when he was in the adjoining refreshment chamber, she could sense him, a warmth, a pull, an awareness that seemed to bypass her conscious mind and connect directly to something primitive and powerful within her. Lyra's holographic communication that afternoon only confirmed her fears. You look different, Lyra observed immediately. The patterns are starting to show. The conjunction is affecting you already, isn't it? Zelia nodded tersely. The royal biology responds first. You should begin feeling the effects soon as well. Lyra shrugged. I'm not worried. Unlike you, I don't have diplomatic functions to maintain through all. They'll lock me in my containment suite with my entertainment systems and mood stabilizers, and I'll emerge a week later slightly bored, but none the worse for wear. Her expression turned concerned. But you, with the summit negotiations scheduled during peak conjunction, I will manage, as I always do, Zelia interrupted. The protocols exist for a reason. The protocols are barbaric, Lyra countered, forcing you to perform complex diplomatic functions while chemically suppressing natural biological processes. Enough, Lyra, Zelia said sharply. I have additional concerns at present that I cannot discuss over standard communication channels. Lyra's eyes widened with interest. Intriguing. Does it have anything to do with my delivery that apparently never arrived? Possibly, Zelia admitted. I require your assistance. With absolute discretion. Lyra's holographic form practically vibrated with excitement. I knew it. Something interesting is finally happening to you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Lyra arrived, her shock at discovering Kalen quickly gave way to delighted fascination. A human? In your chambers? During conjunction, she circled him like a curious predator examining unusual prey. This is better than any entertainment program I could have imagined. I'm glad my potentially fatal shipping error is amusing to you, Kalen remarked dryly, though he seemed more amused and offended by Lyra's frank assessment. Oh, it's beyond amusing, Lyra assured him. It's practically cosmic poetry. I order my repressed sister a comfort aid to help her relax, and instead, she gets a rugged human male delivered right as her biological imperatives are awakening. She turned to Zelia with a wicked grin. The universe has an interesting sense of humor, doesn't it? The universe has a problematic understanding of appropriate timing, Zelia replied stiffly. Can you help obtain the components Kalen needs for repairs, or not? Lyra sobered slightly. I can try, but it won't be easy. Security has been increased with the approaching conjunction, and unauthorized technology acquisitions will be scrutinized more closely than usual. I've made a list, Kalen said, handing Lyra a small data crystal. Nothing that should raise too many alarms individually, but together they'll let me fix the communication array. As they discussed the logistics of obtaining the necessary components, Zelia found herself increasingly distracted by Kalen's proximity. The casual way he moved, the animated expressions that crossed his face as he spoke, the occasional brush of his arm against hers as they examined the damaged pod. Each small contact sending increasingly noticeable pulses of bioluminescence rippling beneath her skin. When Lyra finally left with a list of needed components, promising to return as soon as possible, an awkward silence fell between Zelia and Kalen. So, he finally said, this conjunction thing. How bad does it get exactly? Zelia hesitated, unsure how to explain what she herself had never fully experienced. Outside the controlled environment of a containment suite, the historical records describe it as overwhelming. Before modern protocols, it was a time of significant emotional and physical expression. You mean your people actually allowed themselves to feel things? Kalen asked with gentle teasing. How scandalous. Something about his tone broke through Zelia's usual reserve. You mock what you don't understand, she said, her voice sharper than intended. Our biological imperatives are powerful, particularly for the royal lineage. Without the protocols, without control, we become vulnerable. Kalen's expression softened. And vulnerability is terrifying when you've been taught all your life to maintain perfect control. It wasn't a question, but a statement of understanding that surprised her with its perception. Yes, she admitted quietly. For what it's worth, he said after a moment, I think you're handling this whole situation with remarkable grace. Unexpected alien in your bedroom, biological mating season approaching, royal duties to maintain. I'd probably be having a complete breakdown. The simple acknowledgement of her struggle, offered without judgment or expectation, affected Zelia more deeply than she expected. A strange sensation built in her chest, her throat tightening with emotion she couldn't name. Thank you, she managed, the words feeling inadequate. Kalen smiled, that transformative expression that seemed to change the very atmosphere around him. You're welcome, princess. That night, Zelia's usual meditation routines failed utterly. The approaching conjunction made concentration impossible, her mind continually drifting to the man sleeping just meters away from her on a makeshift pallet they had arranged. She could sense him even through the privacy screen that divided her sleeping area from the rest of the chamber. His breathing, his warmth, his very presence calling to something primal within her. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed with increasing intensity, responding to thoughts and feelings she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. Zelia pressed her hands against her face, feeling the warm glow against her palms, and for the first time in her meticulously controlled life, she feared she might not be strong enough to maintain the composure expected of her. The following morning brought new complications in the form of an unexpected visitor. Lord Valerius, the ambitious minister of interstellar affairs who had made no secret of his desire for a political alliance with Zilia, arrived unannounced at her chambers. Princess Zilia, his voice came through the communication system. I request a brief audience regarding the upcoming diplomatic summit. Zilia shot a panicked look at Kalen, who immediately understood, grabbing his few belongings and retreating into the refreshment chamber. One moment, Lord Valerius, she called, quickly checking that no evidence of Kalen remained before allowing the door to open. Valerius entered with the precise, measured movements typical of high-ranking Cygnian males. His tall, slender form was draped in the formal robes of his office, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, took in her appearance with obvious interest. The conjunction approaches, he observed, noting the visible luminescence beneath her skin. Yet you remain uncommitted for the alignment ceremony. The alignment ceremony, a sanitized, modernized version of what had once been a frank mating ritual, was now primarily a political affair, where compatible Cygnians of appropriate rank formally paired for the duration of the conjunction cycle. For someone of Zilia's status, her choice of alignment partner carried significant political implications. My focus has been on the diplomatic summit, she replied carefully. The Proxima delegation requires careful handling. Indeed, Valerius agreed smoothly, which is why I believe an alignment between us would send a powerful message of internal unity to our visitors. The Minister of Interstellar Affairs and the primary diplomatic envoy joined in alignment during negotiations. Most auspicious. Zilia maintained her composed expression despite the wave of revulsion that passed through her. Valerius had always affected her negatively. Something about his calculating ambition repelled her on an instinctive level that went beyond logical assessment. I will consider all appropriate alignment options, she said noncommittally. The royal household has certain obligations to consider in such matters. Valerius stepped closer, too close for proper protocol, his eyes fixed on the patterns beneath her skin. The royal biology responds strongly to the conjunction, he noted, his voice dropping to a lower register. Historical records suggest that those of your lineage experience particularly vivid manifestations of the cycle. I would be honored to help you navigate such intense experiences. The thinly veiled suggestion made Zilia's skin crawl, but before she could formulate a properly diplomatic rejection, a noise came from the refreshment chamber, the unmistakable sound of something falling. Valerius's head snapped toward the sound. You have someone here? His tone shifted from seductive to suspicious in an instant. My attendant, Zilia lied quickly, preparing my ceremonial ablutions for this afternoon's preliminary meeting. Valerius's eyes narrowed. Strange. I was informed you had dismissed your attendance for the morning cycle. He took a step toward the refreshment chamber. Lord Valerius, Zilia said sharply, drawing on every ounce of royal authority she possessed. You forget yourself. These are my private chambers, and you have not been granted full access privileges. He stopped, clearly torn between curiosity and respect for protocol. Of course, Your Highness. I overstepped. He inclined his head in the formal gesture of apology, though his eyes remained coldly calculating. I will take my leave, but I hope you will consider my proposal for alignment. The political advantages would be significant. After Valerius finally departed, Zilia leaned against the door, her heart racing with an unusual intensity. Is he gone? Kalen's voice came softly from the refreshment chamber before he cautiously emerged. Sorry about the noise. Knocked over some kind of crystal container. Nothing broke, he added quickly. He's gone, Zilia confirmed, still trying to calm her unusually strong physiological response to the confrontation. But he's suspicious. Valerius misses nothing, and he has spies throughout the palace complex. Charming fellow, Kalen remarked, his tone making it clear he thought the opposite. So he wants to be your, what did he call it? Alignment partner? I'm guessing that's the sanitized version of a conjunction mate. Zilia felt her luminescent patterns flare involuntarily at the blunt terminology. It is a political arrangement, she said stiffly. Modern Signian society has evolved beyond the primitive biological imperatives that once drove the conjunction. Kalen gave her a look that suggested he didn't believe this for a moment. Right. That's why you're literally glowing, and why Lord Creepy was looking at you like you were his next acquisition. Your assessment, while crude, is not entirely inaccurate, Zilia admitted. Valerius seeks power, and alignment with a member of the royal lineage would significantly enhance his political position. Kalen studied her for a moment. And what do you want, princess? Not what's politically advantageous, not what's expected. What do you actually want? The question struck Zilia with unexpected force. No one had asked her what she wanted in so long that she wasn't sure she knew how to answer. What I want is irrelevant, she finally said. My position carries responsibilities that supersede personal desires. Kalen shook his head. Everyone's personal desires matter, Zilia. Even yours. He said her name without her title, a familiarity that should have offended her, but instead sent another wave of luminescence rippling beneath her skin. Before she could respond, Lyra's urgent communication chime sounded. Her holographic form appeared, looking uncharacteristically concerned. Valerius has ordered increased security sweeps throughout the royal residential wing, she reported without preamble. And he specifically requested additional monitoring of your chambers, claiming concerns about your stability as the conjunction approaches. He suspects something, Zilia said, exchanging a worried glance with Kalen. It gets worse, Lyra continued. I've managed to acquire some of the components on the list, but security restrictions have been tightened on several key items. It's going to take longer than we thought. We may not have longer, Kalen pointed out. If they're increasing security and monitoring, it's only a matter of time before they discover me here. And the conjunction is progressing more rapidly than anticipated, Zilia added, acutely aware of the intensifying sensations in her body. The heightened sensitivity, the increasingly visible luminescence, the strange pull she felt toward Kalen that seemed to grow stronger by the hour. I might have a solution, Lyra said, her expression turning mischievous despite the seriousness of the situation. But you're not going to like it, sister. At this point, I would consider any viable option, Zilia replied. The annual inspection of the historical archives in the lower levels is scheduled for tomorrow. Security will be focused on the upper levels where the diplomatic delegations are arriving, Lyra explained. I could create a diversion that would allow us to move Kalen to my chambers temporarily. They're less closely monitored than yours, and I have better access to the technology needed for the remaining repairs. And how exactly will we move him through the palace without detection? Zilia asked skeptically. Lyra's holographic form practically sparkled with mischievous delight. That's the part you won't like. We'll disguise him as your personal conjunction attendant. My what? Zilia exclaimed, luminescent patterns flaring with shock. It's perfect, Lyra insisted. The royal family is permitted special attendance during conjunction. It's an ancient tradition that's still respected, even if rarely used in modern times. No one would question you having a hooded attendant escorting you through the palace at this time. That's completely inappropriate, Zilia protested, though her mind was already analyzing the feasibility of the plan despite her personal discomfort. Do you have a better idea? Lyra challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you have a human male in your chambers as the conjunction approaches, with increased security sweeps coming, and a creepy minister who seems determined to claim you for political advancement. Put that way, the choice seemed clear, if deeply uncomfortable. Very well, Zilia conceded reluctantly. Make the necessary arrangements. After Lyra's hologram disappeared, an awkward silence fell between Zilia and Kalen. So, he finally said, his usual confidence tempered with genuine concern, I'm going to be your conjunction attendant? What exactly does that entail? Traditionally, royal conjunction attendants provided physical and emotional support during the most intense periods of the cycle, Zilia explained, struggling to maintain her composure as she discussed matters that were never spoken of in polite Signian society. In ancient times, they were often intimate companions. In modern practice, they are more symbolic, ceremonial figures who rarely have actual contact with the royal they attend. I see, Kalen said thoughtfully. And no one will find it strange that you suddenly have one of these attendants? It's unusual but not unprecedented, Zelia replied. The royal family retains certain traditional privileges. What's more concerning is that you are obviously not Signian. You'll need to remain completely covered and silent during the transfer. Kayla nodded, accepting the necessity. I could do that. I've smuggled far more conspicuous cargo through much tighter security. He studied her face for a moment. Are you okay with this plan? It seems to make you uncomfortable. His concern, genuine and without agenda, touched something in Zelia that had long remained dormant. I am unaccustomed to improvisations of this nature, she admitted. My life has always followed strict protocols and predetermined paths. This situation is unprecedented in my experience. Sometimes the unexpected turns out to be exactly what we needed, Kalen said softly. Even when it arrives in a damaged escape pod instead of as a cuddly toy. Despite everything, Zelia found herself almost smiling at his reference. Let us hope your optimism is justified. The consequences if we're discovered would be severe. The transfer plan was set for the following morning. Lyra delivered the ceremonial attendant robes, voluminous garments of deep blue with a hooded cowl that would completely conceal Kalen's non-Signian features. She also brought a crude but functional biosignature modulator that would help mask his human life signs from the palace's more sophisticated security scanners. It's not perfect, Lyra warned as she helped adjust the device on Kalen's wrist, but it should be enough to get you past superficial scans. Just don't let anyone do a direct medical evaluation. I'll try to avoid the palace doctor, Kalen agreed dryly, examining the flowing robes with amused skepticism. I've worn some strange disguises in my time, but royal mating season attendant is definitely a first. Conjunction attendant, Zelia corrected automatically, though she knew the distinction was largely semantic. As dawn approached, bringing with it the time for their planned movement through the palace, Zelia found herself increasingly affected by the advancing conjunction. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin no longer merely pulsed but flowed in continuous waves, their soft glow visible even through her formal attire. Her senses had heightened to an almost painful degree. The subtle sounds of Kalen's breathing, the faint scent that was uniquely his, the warmth that seemed to radiate from him, all registered with an intensity that made maintaining her composure increasingly difficult. You're really starting to light up, Kalen observed gently as they prepared to leave. Are you sure you're going to be able to make it through the palace without, I don't know, going full supernova? I will manage, Zelia insisted, though with less conviction than she would have liked. The royal lineage is trained from childhood to maintain control during conjunction. Kalen looked unconvinced but didn't press the issue. Lead the way. Princess, your humble attendant awaits your command. Despite the gravity of their situation, there was a warmth in his voice that sent another wave of luminescence cascading beneath Zelia's skin. The journey through the palace corridors was a test of endurance unlike any Zelia had faced before. Every step seemed to increase her awareness of Kalen walking silently behind her, his presence a tangible force that pulled at something deep and primal within her. The formal greetings she exchanged with palace staff and nobles they encountered required concentration that was rapidly becoming difficult to maintain. They were halfway to Lyra's chambers when disaster nearly struck. Turning a corner, they came face to face with Lord Valerius, accompanied by two security officers. Princess Zelia, he greeted her, his eyes immediately noting the intensity of her bioluminescence before shifting to the hooded figure behind her. I was not aware you had engaged a conjunction attendant. It was a recent decision, Zelia replied, fighting to keep her voice steady and dignified. The approaching diplomatic summit requires me to be at my best. The attendant will help manage the more distracting aspects of the conjunction. Valerius's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Most modern royals rely on chemical suppression rather than the old ways. He took a step closer to Kalen, studying the hooded figure with obvious distrust. I do not recognize this attendant from the palace staff, The attendant was arranged through private channels, Zilia explained, silently grateful for her years of diplomatic training that allowed her to maintain a facade of calm despite her internal panic. By my sister, who thought I might benefit from traditional methods. I see, Valerius said coldly. Perhaps the attendant would honor us by lowering their hood? It is customary to show one's face to a minister of my rank. Before Zilia could formulate a response, a commotion erupted at the far end of the corridor. Alarms blaring and security personnel rushing toward what appeared to be a serious breach in the palace's environmental systems. Steam billowed from a ruptured conduit, and automated warnings echoed through the hallway. Lord Valerius, one of the security officers, called urgently. The environmental breach is near the diplomatic quarters. Valerius hesitated, clearly torn between his suspicions about Zilia's mysterious attendant and his duties regarding the diplomatic visitors. Duty won out, but not without a final warning glance. We will continue this discussion later, Princess, he said meaningfully before hurrying away with his security detail. Once they were alone in the corridor, Zilia let out a shaky breath. That was too close. Your sister's diversion worked perfectly, Kalen murmured from beneath his hood. Remind me never to underestimate her. They continued their journey with increased urgency, finally reaching Lyra's chambers without further incident. Once inside, with the door securely locked, Kalen pushed back his hood and exhaled heavily. I don't think I'd make a career as a royal attendant, he remarked, shrugging off the heavy, ceremonial robes. Too much standing around looking mysterious. Lyra, who had been anxiously awaiting their arrival, grinned triumphantly. The environmental system malfunction worked beautifully. It'll take them hours to trace it back to the cascade failure I programmed. You could have warned us, Zilia admonished, though her relief outweighed her disapproval. Where's the fun in that? Lyra asked with a wink before turning serious. But we have a new problem. The security protocols for the diplomatic summit have been moved up due to the accelerated conjunction timeline. All palace residents will be required to undergo full biometric scans within the next cycle to receive clearance for the restricted areas. Which means they'll discover I'm not exactly a local, Kalen concluded grimly. Exactly, Lyra confirmed. On the positive side, I've acquired most of the components you needed. The remaining pieces should arrive by this evening through my alternative supply channels. How long will the repairs take once we have all the components? Zilia asked, increasingly aware of the mounting complications of their situation and of her own deteriorating control as the conjunction progressed. Kalen ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Zilia had come to recognize as indicating concentration or concern. With the right parts, maybe 12 hours. The damage to the communication array was significant. That may not be soon enough, Zilia said, unconsciously wrapping her arms around herself as if to contain the intensifying sensations coursing through her body. The biometric scans begin tomorrow at dawn. Then we need a different plan, Lyra stated firmly. Or rather, an additional plan. She studied her sister with knowing eyes. Zilia, when was the last time you went to the containment suites? The containment suites, specially designed environments where royals traditionally weathered the peak of conjunction and isolation, were located in a secure, private section of the palace rarely accessed except during the cycle. 3 days ago, for the preliminary preparation rituals, Zilia replied. Why? Because the suites aren't subject to the same security protocols as the rest of the palace, Lyra explained. They're considered sacrosanct during conjunction. No scans, no monitoring, complete privacy guaranteed by ancient law that even Valerius can't override. Understanding dawned on Zilia. You suggest hiding Kalen in a royal containment suite? Not just hiding him, Lyra corrected. I'm suggesting you both use the containment suite. You're clearly approaching peak conjunction. Don't try to deny it. I can see how intensely you're luminescing, and you need the specialized environment of the suite anyway. It's the perfect cover. That's, Zilia began, but found herself unable to articulate exactly what it was. Inappropriate? Certainly. Dangerous? Possibly. Tempting in ways she wasn't prepared to examine? Undeniably. It makes sense from a practical standpoint. Kalen said carefully, his eyes meeting Zilia's with an intensity that sent another cascade of light flowing beneath her skin. But it should be your decision, princess. I don't want to impose any more than I already have. Zilia found herself caught between protocol, practicality, and something deeper, something primal and increasingly insistent that had been awakened not just by the conjunction, but by the presence of this unpredictable, compassionate, utterly alien man who had literally fallen into her life. I will make arrangements for the suite, she finally said, her formal tone belied by the brilliant patterns of light, now clearly visible even through her heaviest garments. But we must adhere to strict boundaries within the space. If either Lyra or Kalen noted the implicit acknowledgement that such boundaries might be difficult to maintain, they were kind enough not to mention it. The transfer to the containment suite that evening provided new challenges. Traditionally, royals entered the suites with great ceremonial fanfare, but with an unauthorized alien in tow, Zilia opted for a more discreet approach. Using her authority as first daughter, she declared a preference for a private commencement of her conjunction isolation, a choice unusual enough to raise eyebrows but not suspicions. The suite itself was a revelation to Kalen. Unlike the austere, minimalist design of the regular palace chambers, the containment environment was almost decadently sensual. Soft, responsive surfaces covered every area, changing temperature and texture in response to the occupants' bioluminescent patterns. Ambient lighting adjusted automatically to complement the royal's current luminescence. Even the air seemed different, richer somehow, infused with subtle elements designed to ease the intensity of the conjunction experience. This is not what I expected from Signian design, Kalen remarked as they entered, the massive doors sealing behind them with a soft but definitive sound. It's almost primal, Zilia finished for him, acutely aware of how the environment was already responding to her advanced conjunction state. The suites are designed according to ancient specifications, from before our society embraced rigid control. They are one of the few concessions our ancestors made to biological necessity. Kalen nodded, taking in the space with undisguised fascination. So, this is where you usually experience conjunction? Alone in this beautiful prison. It is not a prison, Zilia corrected automatically, though something in his description resonated uncomfortably. It is a sanctuary, a safe space to weather the biological imperatives without. She trailed off, unsure how to articulate concepts that were never discussed in polite Signian society. Without losing control, Kalen finished gently. Without letting anyone see you as anything other than perfectly composed and proper, Zilia turned away, moving toward a control panel to adjust the suite settings. Lyra said she would deliver the remaining components through the service passage tomorrow. There's a small technical area adjacent to the main chamber where you can work on your repairs. She gestured to a discreet doorway. You should find it adequate for your needs. Kalen recognized the deflection but didn't press. Thank you. I appreciate everything you've done to help me, Zilia. I know none of this has been easy for you. His simple gratitude, expressed without pretense or protocol, affected her more deeply than elaborate formal thanks ever could. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin responded, flaring in intricate designs that reflected emotional states she rarely acknowledged, even to herself. You should rest, she said, still not. Meeting his eyes. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. As night fell and the palace beyond their sanctuary grew quiet, Zilia found sleep impossible. The conjunction had progressed to a point where her entire body felt like a live wire, every nerve ending sensitized to a degree that made even the gentle touch of the suite's responsive fabrics almost overwhelming. The bioluminescent patterns no longer merely flowed beneath her skin, but danced in complex, mesmerizing patterns that reflected the turmoil of her suppressed emotions and desires. In the small technical area adjacent to the main chamber, Kalen also remained awake, though for different reasons. The components Lyra had managed to acquire allowed him to begin preliminary repairs on the communication array, but the work was delicate and demanding. Still, it wasn't the technical challenges that kept him from sleep, but thoughts of the extraordinary woman in the next room. A princess of an alien race, caught between duty and desire, struggling to maintain control even as her biology demanded release. He had seen how the luminescence beneath her skin responded to him, flaring brighter when he was near, forming intricate patterns when they spoke, cascading in waves when they accidentally touched. He wasn't ignorant of what that might mean, but he was determined to respect her boundaries, regardless of what his own growing feelings might be. Dawn brought no relief. If anything, Zilia's condition had intensified overnight. When she emerged from her sleeping area, the luminescence had progressed to a point where it shone through her skin with breathtaking beauty, transforming her into a living artwork of flowing light. Her movements were less precisely controlled than usual, her breathing quicker, her eyes, normally so cool and composed, now bright with an inner fire that both alarmed and captivated Kalen. "Zilia," he said cautiously, setting aside the component he'd been working on. "Are you okay?" "The conjunction progresses as expected," she replied, her voice higher and less measured than usual. "I am managing the experience." But even as she spoke, a wave of luminescence rippled across her skin in a pattern so intense it momentarily illuminated the entire chamber. She gasped, one hand flying to her throat as if to contain the sound. Kalen took an instinctive step toward her, then stopped himself. "What can I do? How can I help?" The question, asked with genuine concern rather than fear or fascination, broke through Zilia's rapidly disintegrating composure. "There is nothing to be done," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The biological imperatives of conjunction must run their course. Normally, I would use chemical suppressants to maintain control during diplomatic functions, but without them," she gestured helplessly at her luminescent form. "Without them, you're experiencing everything you're usually not allowed to feel," Kalen finished quietly. "All at once." "Yes." The simple admission seemed to cost her greatly. Before Kalen could respond, the discreet chime of the service passage announced a delivery. He moved to retrieve it, finding not only the remaining components he needed, but also a secure communication device from Lyra with an urgent message. "Palace security has been fully activated. Valerius is conducting searches of all residential quarters. He knows something is wrong. Repair communications quickly. We'll try to create diversion to buy time." "Bad news?" Zilia asked, noting his expression as he returned. "Valerius is hunting for me," he confirmed, showing her the message. "But I have all the components now. I can finish the repairs." "How long?" Zilia asked, visibly struggling to focus through the mounting effects of the conjunction. 6 hours, maybe less if everything goes perfectly, Kalen replied, already mentally planning the sequence of repairs. Zilia nodded, another wave of luminescence flowing across her skin. "Then you should begin immediately." I will attempt to rest and maintain control." As Kalen threw himself into the repair work with renewed urgency, Zilia retreated to the furthest corner of the suite, using every technique she had been taught since childhood to contain the raging biological and emotional storm within her. But the conjunction had progressed too far for such methods to be truly effective. Each hour that passed saw her control slipping further, the luminescent patterns growing more pronounced, more responsive, particularly when Kalen moved nearby or spoke to her. For hours into the repairs, disaster struck. A surge in the palace power grid, perhaps natural, perhaps part of Valerius's increasing security measures, triggered a protective shutdown in the containment suite systems. The ambient lighting flickered and died, leaving only the ethereal glow of Zilia's bioluminescence to illuminate the space. "What happened?" Kalen asked, emerging from the technical area where he'd been working. "Emergency protocol," Zilia explained, her voice strained. "The suite has detected a potential security breach and initiated isolation procedures. All external connections are severed until the system resets or receives authorized override commands." "How long will that take?" Kalen asked, already calculating how this would affect his repair timeline. "Minimum of 6 hours," Zilia replied, unable to keep the despair from her voice. by which time the full security sweep will have reached this section of the palace. The implications were clear. They had run out of time. Even if Kalen completed the repairs, the isolation protocol meant he couldn't send or receive any signals until the suite systems reset, long after Valerius would have discovered them. There must be another way, Kalen insisted, unwilling to accept defeat. Some emergency override or— There is not, Zelia interrupted, her composure finally shattering. We are trapped, Kalen. When the systems reset, Valerius will find you here, and the diplomatic incident will be catastrophic. I will be disgraced, possibly charged with harboring an unauthorized alien during a high-security period. Lyra will face consequences for her involvement. All because I didn't follow the proper protocols when you arrived. All because I allowed myself to— She stopped abruptly, luminescent patterns flaring with emotions she couldn't express. Because you allowed yourself to what? Kalen asked softly, taking a step toward her. The suite, responsive even in its emergency mode, adjusted to her shifting emotional state, the surfaces around them growing warmer, softer, the air infusing with subtle elements designed to soothe and comfort. Because I allowed myself to feel, Zelia whispered, the admission costing her the last of her carefully maintained control. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin erupted in a display of breathtaking beauty and intensity, reflecting emotions long suppressed: fear, defiance, and something deeper, warmer, directed unmistakably toward the human standing before her. Kalen's expression softened as he took another step closer. And is that really so terrible? Feeling something? Being someone beyond the perfect princess, the flawless diplomat? You don't understand, Zelia said, though she didn't retreat from his approach. For my people, especially those of royal lineage, control is everything. The intensity of our biology, particularly during conjunction, once led to chaos, to wars, to decisions based on passion rather than reason. The protocols exist for a purpose. I'm sure they do, Kalen acknowledged. But there's a difference between healthy control and denial of your very nature. He was close enough now that the luminescence from her skin cast his features in a soft, ethereal glow. Since I arrived, I've watched you fighting not just the conjunction, but yourself, everything you actually want and feel. What I want doesn't matter, Zelia insisted, though the luminescent patterns betrayed her words, forming intricate designs that spoke of longing and connection. It matters to me, Kalen said simply, and with those 4 words, something within Zelia finally surrendered. Perhaps it was the conjunction at its peak, perhaps it was the weeks of tension and fear, or perhaps it was simply the way this human looked at her, not as a princess or a diplomat, but as a woman, a being worthy of care and understanding. Whatever the cause, Zelia found herself moving forward, closing the last distance between them, her luminescent hand reaching up to touch his face with a gentleness that belied the storm raging within her. The moment her fingertips made contact with his skin, the luminescence erupted, flowing not just beneath her skin, but outward, enveloping them both in a cocoon of living light. Kalen gasped, clearly feeling something of the connection, his own physiology responding to hers in ways neither of them had anticipated. Zelia, he breathed, her name a question and an answer all at once. In response, she did what no properly raised Cygnian princess would ever do. She eliminated the formal distance between them entirely, stepping into his embrace with a soft sound that was half relief, half surrender. The contact was overwhelming. Every place their bodies touched sent cascades of sensation through her, the luminescence responding in patterns more complex and beautiful than any recorded in Cygnian history. It was as though her body had been waiting her entire life for this moment, for this connection. Kalen's arms encircled her with gentle strength, offering support as she trembled with the intensity of it all. There was desire in his touch, but also a profound tenderness that moved her more deeply than mere passion could have. He held her as though she were precious, fragile, and strong all at once. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. The promise." simple but profound, broke through the last of her resistance. Zilia looked up at him, her luminescent patterns reflecting emotions she no longer tried to hide. Without words, she communicated what she needed, what she wanted, what she had denied herself for too long. Kalen understood. With infinite care, he lowered his face to hers, their lips meeting in a kiss that transcended species and protocols, connecting them on a level beyond the physical. The luminescence surged around them, filling the chamber with living light that danced and flowed in response to their shared emotion. Time lost meaning. In the ethereal glow of their connection, Zilia discovered aspects of herself long suppressed. Joy, passion, a capacity for tenderness she had never been allowed to express. Each touch, each shared breath, each moment of connection freed her further from the constraints that had defined her existence. Kalen, for his part, found himself overwhelmed by the beauty of her true self. Not just the physical luminescence, extraordinary as it was, but the passionate, intelligent, courageous woman emerging from behind the mask of perfect control. He had known many women across many star systems, but none had affected him as deeply as this princess who glowed with inner light. How long they remained in each other's arms, neither could say. The sweet, responsive to their emotional and physical states, created a cocoon of perfect comfort around them, the surfaces shifting and adapting to their needs without intrusion or disruption. It was the sudden reactivation of the sweet systems that finally broke the spell. Lights flickered back to life. Environmental controls hummed with renewed activity, and the reality of their situation crashed back upon them with brutal clarity. Zilia pulled back slightly, though she remained within the circle of Kalen's arms. "The systems have reset," she said, her voice steadier than it had been in days despite the profound intimacy they had just shared. "We have very little time before Valerius and his security forces arrive." Kalen nodded, reluctantly releasing her, but maintaining a connection through their clasped hands. "I need to finish the repairs to the communication array. If I can get a signal out to any passing ships." "It won't be enough," Zilia interrupted gently. "Even if you contacted a ship, they couldn't reach us before Valerius does. And once they're discovered here, in a royal containment suite during conjunction, the implications hung heavily between them. Such a breach would be considered not just a security violation, but a cultural desecration, an alien male in a sacred space reserved for royal conjunction. "Then we need to be gone before they arrive," Kalen said, mind racing. "Your sister, could she help us get to a ship, something I could pilot us out of here?" "Us," Zilia repeated, luminescent patterns shifting in surprise. "Yes, us," Kalen confirmed without hesitation. "I'm not leaving you to face Valerius and the consequences alone, Zilia. Not after. Everything." The simple declaration that he would stay, would face whatever came with her, affected Zilia more profoundly than even their physical connection had. In her world of calculated political alliances and carefully negotiated treaties, such unhesitating loyalty was rarer than the most precious gems. "There may be a way," she said slowly, luminescent patterns shifting as her quick mind worked through possibilities. "The diplomatic shuttle bay. It's adjacent to the containment section, connected by a service corridor rarely used except during maintenance periods. Would your security credentials grant access?" Kalen asked. "Yes, but the corridor will be monitored, and any unusual movement would trigger alerts," Zilia replied. "We would need a distraction, something significant enough to draw attention away from the security feeds." At that moment, the communication device Lyra had sent chimed again. Her message was brief but clear. "Valerius knows. Full security sweep of containment section scheduled in 30 minutes. Whatever you're planning, do it now." "We need to contact Lyra," Zilia said urgently. "She can create the diversion we need." Kalen hesitated. "The communication array isn't fully repaired yet. I can send a simple signal, but not establish secure communication." "Simple is all we need," Zilia replied, her royal training asserting itself as she quickly formulated a plan. 3 pulses on the emergency frequency, It's a prearranged signal Lyra and I established years ago. It means create maximum chaos. Kaelin grinned, despite the gravity of their situation. Your sister seems well prepared for rebellion. She's been practicing her entire life, Zilia confirmed with the ghost of a smile. While Kaelin returned to the technical area to send the signal, Zilia moved quickly around the suite, gathering only what was essential. The biosignature modulator to help mask Kaelin's human life. Signs, a small device containing her personal security credentials, and a compact data crystal containing information too valuable to leave behind. When Kaelin emerged, he found her changed, not just in the practical clothing she had donned instead of her formal attire, but in her entire demeanor. She stood straighter, moved with greater purpose, her luminescence still intense, but now focused, controlled in a way that came not from suppression, but from clarity of intent. "The signal's been sent," he reported. "If your sister received it." He was interrupted by a distant but unmistakable sound. Alarms blaring throughout the palace complex, accompanied by automated announcements of a major security breach in the diplomatic quarter. She received it, Zilia confirmed with grim satisfaction. Lyra has never done anything by half measures. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they realize it's a diversion. We need to move now. The service corridor connecting the containment section to the shuttle bay was narrow and utilitarian, lacking the aesthetic refinement of the main palace areas. They moved swiftly but cautiously, Zilia's luminescence providing all the light they needed as the emergency protocols had dimmed the corridor illumination to minimum levels. Almost there, Zilia whispered as they approached the final security checkpoint, a bioscanner that would verify her identity before granting access to the shuttle bay. She placed her hand on the scanner, holding her breath as it analyzed her bioluminescent patterns that were significantly altered by the peak conjunction state and her recent emotional experiences. For a heart-stopping moment, the scanner hesitated, its display flashing uncertainty warnings. Then, recognizing enough key markers to confirm her royal lineage, if not her specific identity, it granted access with a soft chime. The shuttle bay beyond was a marvel of Cygnian engineering, sleek craft arranged in perfect symmetry, their surfaces gleaming in the dim emergency lighting. Zilia moved purposefully toward the smallest of the vessels, a diplomatic courier designed for speed and stealth rather than capacity. "Can you pilot this?" she asked Kaelin as they approached the craft. He examined the control interface visible through the transparent canopy, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the technology. "It's not too different from some of the Proxima designs I've handled. I'll figure it out." Using her credentials, Zilia unlocked the craft, the entry hatch sliding open with silent precision. They boarded quickly, Kaelin moving directly to the pilot's console while Zilia accessed the auxiliary systems. "I'm disabling the automatic flight log transmission," she explained, fingers moving rapidly over the controls. "It won't prevent them from tracking us, but it will buy us a small advantage." Kaelin familiarized himself with the control layout, grateful that the principles of spaceflight remained relatively consistent across different technological implementations. "Where are we going?" he asked as the craft systems came online. "I assume you have a destination in mind?" Before Zilia could respond, the shuttle bay's communications system crackled to life, Lord Valerius's coldly furious voice filling the space. "Princess Zilia, security scans have detected unauthorized access to the diplomatic shuttle bay. Surrender immediately with the alien intruder. This is your only warning before I am forced to take measures that would be regrettable." Zilia's luminescent patterns flared with determination rather than fear. "The neutral trading post in the Abris Nebula," she told Kaelin quickly. "It's beyond Cygnus jurisdiction, but within this vessel's range. We can seek sanctuary there while determining our next steps." "Abris Nebula it is," Kaelin confirmed, activating the craft's engines. The diplomatic courier hummed to life, its sophisticated propulsion system designed for swift, quiet departures, perfect for their needs. As the craft lifted from its docking cradle, the shuttle bay doors remained sealed, Valerius's security override preventing the automatic opening sequence. "The doors!" Zilia exclaimed, rushing to the auxiliary controls. I need to manually override the... Before she could complete the thought, the massive doors began sliding apart, revealing the star-studded blackness of space beyond. On the communication screen, a new face appeared, Lyra, grinning with triumphant mischief. "You didn't think I'd let you leave without a proper goodbye, did you?" she asked, her fingers visibly working controls somewhere off-screen. "I've overridden the bay doors, but Valerius is trying to counter. You have about 30 seconds before he locks them again." "Lyra," Zelia began, emotion tightening her throat, luminescence forming patterns of gratitude and concern. "You'll face consequences for this." "Worth it," Lyra replied without hesitation. "Besides, they'll have to catch me. First, I made my own plans." Her expression softened briefly. "Be free, sister. Find out who you are beyond the protocols." Before Zelia could respond, Kalen accelerated the craft toward the opening, threading the needle of the partially open bay doors with expert precision. Behind them, alarms blared and security craft scrambled, but the diplomatic courier had been designed for speed. Within moments, they had outpaced their pursuers and were climbing rapidly toward the upper atmosphere. "They'll send faster ships after us," Zelia warned, monitoring the rear sensors as Cygnus X-7 receded behind them. "Standard pursuit protocols call for at least 3 interceptors." "Then we'd better make ourselves hard to follow," Kalen replied, piloting the craft into the lingering remnants of the ion storm that had originally disrupted his own ship. The courier shuddered as energetic particles battered its shields, but Kalen navigated the turbulence with the skill born of years of flying through hazardous conditions. When they emerged on the other side, the sensors showed no immediate pursuit. The ion storm had temporarily masked their energy signature, giving them a crucial head start toward the Abras Nebula. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, a strange silence fell between them. The enormity of what they had done, what they had chosen, settled around them like a tangible presence. Zelia stared out at the star-filled vastness, the luminescent patterns beneath her skin now forming slower, more contemplative designs. "Are you okay?" Kalen asked softly, setting the craft on its programmed course before turning to face her. "I have just abandoned my position, my people, and my duty," Zelia replied, her voice surprisingly steady despite the magnitude of her actions. "By all Cygnian standards, I should be devastated." She turned to him, the luminescence brightening as their eyes met. "Yet I feel liberated, as though I've been freed from a containment field I never fully acknowledged was there." Kalen smiled, that transformative expression that had first begun to crack her careful composure weeks ago in her chambers. "Freedom has that effect," he said, "especially when it's chosen rather than given." "I chose this," Zelia confirmed, reaching for his hand, the luminescence flowing between them where their skin touched. "I chose you." The simple declaration carried the weight of all she had sacrificed, all she had risked. Kalen understood, his fingers tightening around hers. "I know what it cost you," he said quietly, "and I promise you, Zelia, I will spend every day making sure you never regret that choice." They traveled for 3 days, avoiding major shipping lanes and patrol routes, before reaching the Abras Nebula. The spectacular swirling gases, purple, blue, and gold, created a natural haven for those seeking to disappear. The energy patterns disrupting tracking systems and communications in ways that made it perfect for a trading post catering to those operating in the shadows between official jurisdictions. The settlement itself was a marvel of adaptation. Habitat modules and repurposed vessels connected in a sprawling, organic pattern that contrasted sharply with the rigid symmetry of Cygnian architecture. Ships of 100 different designs docked at makeshift berths, their diverse crews mingling in marketplaces where goods and information flowed freely, untaxed, and largely unregulated. For Zelia, raised in the sterile perfection of royal protocols, the vibrant chaos was simultaneously overwhelming and exhilarating. The crowds, the noise, the dizzying variety of beings from across the galaxy, all of it assaulted her senses in ways both terrifying and thrilling. Stay close, Kalen murmured as they made their way through a particularly crowded section of the trading post. This place operates on its own rules. Not dangerous exactly, but fluid. Zilia nodded, fighting the ingrained urge to maintain proper diplomatic distance as she stayed near his side, her hood pulled low to conceal her distinctively Signian features. Though the peak of conjunction had passed, leaving her luminescence at more manageable levels, she still glowed enough to draw attention, if fully visible. They found temporary lodging in a quiet section of the settlement, a small suite with transparent walls that offered a breathtaking view of the nebula's swirling colors. The proprietor, a multi-limbed being with compound eyes and an admirably discreet manner, accepted their payment without questions about identity or origins. As night fell across the settlement, an artificial cycle maintained for the comfort of diurnal species, Zilia stood at the transparent wall, watching distant ships move through the colorful gases of the nebula. The patterns of her diminished but still present luminescence reflected the swirling colors, creating a harmony between her body and the celestial display beyond. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, sensing Kalen's approach behind her. He stood beside her, his shoulder just touching hers as he looked out at the same view. "That depends on what you want, princess." "I'm not a princess anymore," she reminded him. "I've abandoned my title, my position, my people." "You left your official role," Kalen corrected gently. "But who you are, the intelligence, the compassion, the inner strength that made you an extraordinary diplomat, those things you brought with you." Zilia turned to him, studying his face in the combined light of the nebula and her own soft glow. "And what would you suggest I do with those qualities now, Captain Vance? I doubt the trading routes have much need for diplomatic protocols." "Maybe not," he acknowledged with a smile. "But there are places between the major powers where someone who understands both rigid structure and flexible adaptation could do a lot of good. The margins of civilization need bridges to Zilia." The idea resonated with something deep within her, a purpose that wasn't dictated by royal obligation, but chosen freely. "You mean serving as an intermediary between different worlds? Outside official channels?" "It's what I've done for years in my own way," Kalen said. "Moving goods where they're needed most, regardless of regulations. But you could do more. Help negotiate terms between groups that official diplomats won't touch. Establish connections where traditional authorities have failed." Zilia felt the luminescent patterns beneath her skin shift in response to the growing sense of possibility. For the first time in her life, she was contemplating a future shaped by her own choices rather than predetermined protocols. "And what about us?" she asked, the directness of the question surprising even herself. The old Zilia would have approached such a delicate topic with carefully constructed diplomatic phrasing, testing the waters through layers of polite indirection. But she wasn't that person anymore. Kalen's expression softened, his hand finding hers, fingers intertwining. "That's the most important question," he agreed, "and one I've been thinking about since the moment we escaped." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "What happened between us during conjunction was extraordinary, but I know enough about Signian biology to understand that it was a time of heightened emotion and response for you. You think what I felt, what we shared, was merely biological?" Zilia asked, luminescent patterns flickering with concern. "I think it was real," Kalen assured her quickly. "But I want to make sure what's between us isn't just about escaping one life or the intensity of conjunction. I want you to have the freedom to discover who you are now, without feeling obligated to me, because I happen to be the one who fell into your chambers at the right moment." The consideration behind his words, the care for her autonomy and identity, moved Zilia deeply. It confirmed what she had already begun to understand during their journey, that what she felt for this human went far beyond the biological imperatives of conjunction or the drama of their escape. "The conjunction may have awakened feelings I had long suppressed," she acknowledged, her free hand rising to touch his face, luminescence brightening where her fingers met his skin. "But what I feel now with the cycle past is no less real. Perhaps more so, because it is chosen rather than compelled." Kalen turned his face slightly, pressing a kiss to her palm. Then we discover this new life together, he said simply. Day by day. No protocols, no predetermined paths. That sounds both terrifying and wonderful, Zelia admitted. The luminescent patterns forming designs of hope and possibility that would have been impossible to imagine weeks ago in her rigidly controlled existence. The best adventures usually are, Kalen replied, drawing her into his arms as the nebulous colors swirl beyond them, a cosmic mirror to the new possibilities unfolding in their shared future. 3 months later, their small but swift vessel, a significant upgrade from the stolen diplomatic courier they had eventually abandoned, docked at a remote outpost on the edge of the Perseus Arm. The settlement was a meeting point for traders, explorers, and others who preferred the flexibility of frontier existence to the rigid structures of the major powers. Zelia stood at the helm, watching through the view screen as their clearance was processed. Her appearance had changed subtly, but significantly. Her formerly regulation-perfect hair now styled in a more practical manner, her clothing a blend of Cygnian precision and spacer functionality. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin, no longer suppressed by chemical protocols, had settled into a natural rhythm that brightened with her emotions but remained a constant, gentle glow that had become her signature in the places they visited. Clearance granted, came the response. From the Outpost Control Center. Welcome back, Negotiator Zelia. She smiled at the title she had earned over the past months, not through royal decree, but through her own actions. Word had spread quickly among the frontier settlements and independent traders about the former Cygnian princess who could broker agreements where official diplomats feared to tread. Her unique combination of formal diplomatic training and newly embraced flexibility had proven invaluable in resolving disputes that might otherwise have escalated to violence. Kalen entered the bridge, moving with the easy confidence that had first captured her attention in her royal chambers. Home, sweet temporary home, he remarked, coming to stand beside her as the docking procedures completed. At least until our next call. We received a communication while you were checking the engines, Zelia informed him, the luminescent patterns beneath her skin brightening with suppressed excitement. From Lyra. Kalen's eyebrows rose in surprise. They had maintained sporadic, carefully routed contact with Zelia's sister, but direct communications were rare due to the risk of Cygnian authorities tracing the signals. Is she okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Whatever differences might exist between the sisters, Kalen had developed a genuine fondness for the rebellious younger princess who had helped them escape. More than okay, Zelia replied, unable to contain a smile that would have scandalized her former diplomatic colleagues with its open emotion. She's coming to join us. Apparently, life at court became unbearably tedious after our dramatic departure. She's arranged her own exit, significantly more planned than ours, and is bringing something she calls resources we won't believe. Kalen laughed, the sound still sending pleasant ripples through Zelia's luminescent patterns after all these months. The universe isn't ready for both of you operating outside protocol, he said. But I, for one, can't wait to see what happens. As they disembarked into the controlled chaos of the frontier outpost, Zelia reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought her here. From the sterile perfection of her royal chambers to the vibrant uncertainty of life on the galactic frontier. From rigid adherence to protocol to the freedom of chosen connection. From a princess defined by duty to a woman defined by her own choices. All because her impulsive sister had ordered a comfort aid from an unauthorized source, and the universe had delivered something far more valuable instead. Not a cuddly toy to hold during difficult times, but a man who had shown her that genuine connection was worth every risk, every sacrifice, and every protocol broken along the way. As if reading her thoughts, Kalen took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The luminescence flowed between them where their skin touched, no longer the overwhelming cascade of conjunction, but a steady, warm glow of something deeper and more lasting. What are you thinking about? He asked as they made their way through the bustling docking area. Zelia smiled, the expression coming easily now after months of practice. I was thinking that I should thank Lyra properly when she arrives, for ordering me that comfort aid I never actually received. I don't know, Kaelin replied with a mischievous grin that still made her luminescence brighten after all this time. I'd say you got exactly what was advertised, just in a slightly different package than expected. Different indeed, Zelia agreed, squeezing his hand as they moved forward together into their next adventure. But infinitely better than anything that could have been delivered in a standard package. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin formed designs of joy and contentment as they walked side by side. No longer a princess and an accidental delivery, but partners who had chosen each other against all protocols and probabilities, finding in that choice a freedom neither had known was possible.